Welcome to the broadcast tonight, an hour with Nobel Prize-winning economist Milton Friedman.
The stability of the economy is greater than it has ever been in our history. We really are in remarkably good shape. It's amazing that people go around and write stories about how bad the economy is, how it's in trouble, how its foreign debt is going to kill it, or its domestic deficit is going to kill it. Neither one is going to kill it. The domestic deficit is a bad thing if it reflects an increase in government spending, which it partly does. The real problem with government is not the deficit. The real problem with government is the amount of our money that it spends.
Milton Friedman for the hour. Next. Funding for Charlie...
From our studios in New York City, this is Charlie Rose.
Joining me now is Milton Friedman. He is one of the most influential economists and public intellectuals of our time, a champion of the free market economy. His research into monetary and price theory has changed the way we think about issues like inflation, unemployment, the money supply. He was awarded the Nobel Prize for Economics in 1976, served as an economic advisor to Barry Goldwater and Presidents Nixon and Reagan. He and his wife Rose have also been tireless advocates for issues such as drug legalization, Social Security reform, and education, especially school choice and vouchers. This year, they celebrate their 50th anniversary of his idea to create school vouchers. He is currently a senior research fellow at the Hoover Institution and professor emeritus at the University of Chicago. It is an honor to have him back on this program because he is a very young 93. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
It's great to see you. I want to look ahead first, and then we'll look back for the rest of this program. Tell me how you see today the American economy, where there's been some growth beyond expectation, and how it fits within the global economy with the dollar gaining more than people expected it to, the euro doing worse, the rise of China. Give us a sense of how we look at this.
Well, the United States is at the peak of its performance in its history. There has never been a time in the United States when we've had the state of prosperity, its level and its spread, that we've had in the last 10 or 15 years. There's never been a 15-year period in which there has been as little fluctuation in prices, in inflation. Inflation has stayed around 2 or 3% or less for the last 15 years. That's unprecedented.
And you give great credit to Alan Greenspan for that?
I certainly do. I think monetary policy is primarily responsible for it.
Are you surprised that the economy has done as well as it has when we're having a record trade deficit, the current accounts deficit, and record fiscal deficits?
Not at all, because neither of those necessarily impedes our progress. First of all, the trade deficit is not it's not a deficit in another sense. It's a capital surplus. You look at the so-called trade deficit, and on the books, the U.S. is a borrower. We owe money to the rest of the world. But that's because the books are kept in a misleading way. If you look not at the capital, not at the balance sheet, but at the income account, and ask how much income are we getting from foreign-owned assets, from assets that we own abroad,
right,
and how much do we have to pay people who own assets here? It turns out that the outflow of funds from to foreigners is exactly equal, or I say exactly, roughly equal to the inflow. Although on the books, the value of our assets, of the assets that we own abroad, is less than the value of the assets that they own here on the books. It yields as high an income.
But there are constantly people making this argument. We don't save enough, we borrow too much, and we consume too much. On the other hand, countries in Asia especially, which have a lot of American dollars, lend, don't spend, and they are in a better position than we are.
Well, but the statement that we don't save as much is because we measure savings not by these income flows. We don't value our assets appropriately. Our foreign-owned assets are worth more than they are valued on the books because they are yielding a higher return. They are risky assets, and that's why. The thing the United States has, it's a one place in the world where people around the world can go for security, for political security. Nobody who invests his money in the United States is afraid that it's going to be taken away from him by the government except through legal taxes and so on.
So they want our debt because they think the American economy is more stable politically and economically than any other.
They want no-risk money. Let's say you're a Chinese entrepreneur, and you've got you've been one of those lucky people who have built up a lot of money. Do you want to keep it all in China? Don't you think you want to have a little no-risk fund in the United States? So that I think we are a market for people who want no-risk funds.
Okay, but there are many people who will argue that it's great danger for us that South Korea and Japan and the United States and Taiwan hold so many American dollars because if they become disenchanted, they might dump it.
How would they dump it?
They would sell it back.
Sell what?
The debt that they have, the dollars they have.
To whom would they sell it?
Your point is that there's no buyer.
Well, there are buyers. Of course, there's always a buyer. At what price?
But wouldn't that be destabilizing?
Who would lose money on that?
Wouldn't that be destabilizing? Wouldn't that suggest a lack of confidence in the American economy?
Yes, it might. But the people who would lose by it would be the foreigners who held that and who dumped those dollars.
Well, then are they in a frozen position then, so that they have no flexibility?
They're not in a frozen position. They're in a position they want to be in, because that's why they're holding these assets, because they are free of risk, of political risk.
What happens if they would allow...
And in general, let's suppose foreigners start dumping their assets here. They would dump them at distressed prices. They would have low
Once
prices.
it started, this lie would begin.
And who would buy them? The people at home here, the people in the United States who had confidence in the United States. So what you would have would be that the assets would go from weak hands to strong hands. It isn't going to happen because there's no reason for foreigners to dump the dollars.
Well, but nothing is certain, is it? I mean, certainly in economics.
Of course not. Nothing is absolutely certain. But you can be pretty damn sure of what's likely to happen and what isn't.
What might argue the other side? What might cause someone to say, we're holding too many dollars and we don't think it's healthy?
There's only one thing that would cause them to do that, and that's if we engage in an inflation.
But
if our monetary authority lost its good behavior and started to print too much money, that might do it. But that's not going to happen.
Some argue that the dollar has been stronger because American interest rates have gone up, and that has put greater added strength to the dollar. Do you see it that way?
Yes, that has been a factor that has added strength to the dollar. But the dollar was rising before that. The dollar is fundamentally a strong currency.
And the euro is fundamentally?
It depends on the occasion. Right now, it's getting back to where it should be. It's been too strong a dollar. It's been overvalued. The dollar has been undervalued, and the euro has been overvalued.
And that's changing in the recent months.
And that's right.
And you think that's a long-term trend?
Not a long-term trend, but it's a
Short-term.
medium-term trend.
Medium is what, 6 years, 8 years?
10 years.
5, 10 years, right. When you look around the world, what is the impact of the growth rates in China and India on the rest of the world?
It's all to the good for the rest of the world. If we are better off if we have prosperous partners than if we have poor partners. Whom do we want to deal with better? Whom would you rather deal with? Someone who